Sometimes it can feel like food has an emotional control over you. Well, it's time to show your food who's boss with Noom. Noom uses science and personalization to help you manage your weight for the long term. Their psychology-based approach helps you build better habits and behaviors that are easier to maintain. The best part? You decide how Noom fits into your life, not the other way around. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com to sign up for your trial today.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and we continue our 2023 review episodes, recapping how the past season went with a look ahead to this upcoming offseason for the Chicago White Sox and ponder how they could change the roster to compete in 2024. This episode is our final review edition with a look at the White Sox outfielders and catchers. Joining me is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis. And hello, Jim. For these two positions in particular, before the 2023 season, we were hopeful for an immediate impact from Andrew Benintendi and a dead cat bounce from Yasmani Grandal. Unfortunately, we didn't see either of those things, but at least we got to see Luis Robert Jr. break out.
Yeah, well, I would say Grandal was kind of a dead cat bounce, but because he fell so far in 2022, his rebound in 2023 was only like replacement level or like blah. But yeah, I mean, it was a disappointing group as a whole. Like this, you're hoping for some stability in some areas from, like, say, Benintendi to a far lesser extent Grandal. And then you thought you might have some upside with right field, whether it's Oscar Colas, whether it's Eloy Jimenez playing out there. And really, like, all of the upside, all of the impact, all of the optimism was basically solely concentrated in Luis Robert Jr., which is good for Luis Robert Jr. and bad for basically everybody else.
Yeah, so looking at the outfield review, let's start with the good news, and that's Luis Robert Jr. In 2023, for his age 25 season, Robert finally played the majority of his season, 145 games, almost 600 plate appearances for Robert in 2023. He had 595. That is a good sign. He had 144 hits, 36 doubles, 38 home runs, almost a 40-40 season for Luis Robert. He did have 80 RBIs to tie with Andrew Vaughn for the team lead, and he also led the team with 20 stolen bases. He had an 857 OPS, and while the on-base percentage was just 315, we never do expect Luis Robert to be a big on-base percentage type of batter. He did slug 542, and using OPS Plus from Baseball Reference, he was at 128, which means that Luis Robert was 28% above league average. And Jim, we finally get to see this type of breakout season for Luis Robert that we're all hoping for. So much hype when the White Sox did sign him. We got to see it for a month in 2020. We also got to see it for a month in 2021, but we never saw a complete season from Luis Robert. Now that we have at age 25, I think a big question for Luis Robert is this the start of something, Jim? And by something, I mean this is where he's going to be a perennial all-star for the Chicago White Sox, and he's going to be a consistent 4+ WAR type of player.
You would hope so, just because everything is there. If he doesn't improve in any regard, whether defensively, plate discipline, he's still very, very valuable as long as he's healthy. And I think that's really just the thing that looms over everything. It seems like he's figured out maybe a working solution with the hand injuries and wrist issues, particularly with sliding, that he's made some adjustments doing feet first sliding and taking far fewer chances like diving at bags. And that seemed to help him in terms of his day-to-day viability at the plate. But unfortunately then, like, he ended up with a knee injury at the end of the year. Awkward slide feet first, but on some muddy track in Boston where his spikes seem to get stuck and tweaked his knee a bit, and given how little the White Sox had to play for and how much Robert had already accomplished, he basically finished the year on the injury list, called it good. And he was probably like the only player on the White Sox who could call it good. Everybody else needed every single game to try to save their stats more or less. But yeah, I think when it comes to Robert, like there are some ways he can get better, but I think just as long as he stays healthy, basically stay healthy, but in this case, he actually basically stayed healthy this year. You can actually say it about him. He's really, really good. And like he does a lot of things well, hits for power, puts the ball in the air, runs the bases well, can steal a bag, plays exceptional defense. So you look at the on-base percentage and the plate discipline and how it can occasionally get away from him for like a series at a time or a week at a time. And you think, okay, that's a weakness. Can't count on that getting better. Now it's time to try to supplement the roster with players who actually accommodate him in that regard. And it was the similar battle they faced with Jose Abreu, right-handed hitter who occasionally the strike zone gets away from him, occasionally gets into ruts against righties. And the White Sox never figured it out. So here's take two with Robert, seeing if they can figure out like how to, with the rest of the lineup spots, or at least, a handful of them, bring in some lefties, bring in some guys who don't strike out, bring in some guys who get on base, to where like Robert's key flaw isn't something that hampers the roster, because he shouldn't be counted upon to do everything.
I mean, if he's ever going to have a 350 on base percentage, Jim, that's the season where he hits 300.
And
now, it is possible
Yeah.
for Robert to do that, but it's very similar to Tim Anderson, which we've talked about for years, is that Anderson's never going to walk. He's never going to develop that skill to take the free base. So if he's ever going to have a suitable on-base percentage that you would want from a leadoff hitter, he's going to have to hit for average. And when Anderson was rolling, he did. And I think Robert can be a 300 type of hitter. It's just a scary thought because he batted 264 this season. And if he were to increase that number by 36 points, and with the type of power that he has, I mean, you are talking about a 40-40 type of player. And maybe he steals more than 20 bags. And he is still a Gold Glove nominee in center field. Like, I still believe this, Jim, and I don't think I'm crazy. I know the American League can be stacked with high-quality type of players, but I still believe Luis Robert Jr. is an MVP caliber type of talent. And those obviously don't grow on trees. And obviously the White Sox have a very time developing these types of players. So from that perspective, there's no way in the world anyone should entertain the idea of trading Luis Robert. Now, in baseball, you need more than just Luis Robert to win. And we have seen too many White Sox teams in the last 10 years, Jim, have excellent talent surrounded by duds. And looking at this free agency class, I know we are like a parrot right now. We keep repeating this. This free agency class on the position player side is awful. If you don't think the White Sox are going to be good the next 2 years, Jim, with the offseason plan projects coming up on SoxMachine.com, is this the offseason? Is this the time you trade Luis Robert away and kick off another rebuild?
It feels a little bit too early, just because there is a path, and I don't want to sound like Chris Getz here to say like the Central is weak, but like as long as the division is there, like there's no reason to like tear it all down. Like say Colson Montgomery comes up and he looks good, then you'd feel kind of like a dope for trading Luis Robert. Like say if because Montgomery offers what Robert doesn't: left-handed bat, great on base percentage, helps with the middle infield picture. Even if he has to slide over to a different position, like he'll still help. Like Brian Ramos, let's say like he's okay. Like all of a sudden, like some of the issues you had are suddenly solved, and now you trade Luis Robert, you like trade for like AA prospects or something like that. Then you kind of waste the opening moments of maybe Montgomery's window. So like, I think there's still an overlap here to where like Robert and Montgomery, the two best position player prospects you've had, and certainly Montgomery, like the best position player prospect they've drafted, like they have a little bit of time to overlap, and a lot of payroll is coming off the books with Moncada coming off, with Jimenez maybe coming off if he's not anything like, to where they can supplement him. So it does strike me as like a little bit early, especially since like Robert might not be selling high yet because this is the first season he's only played. This is only the first season he played 100 games. So like there may be teams saying like, why are they trying to get out from under Robert? Like, why are they, do they think that he's not going to stay healthy and they're selling high? So I think they don't have to, get out from under that contract. I mean, it's a case where like he's so valuable in the field that like he has a lot of margin for error in terms of like how affordable that contract extension is. Whereas Jimenez does not. You're right now, Jimenez, he wasted his margin for error basically with the last couple of years where they're supposed to be the affordable ones. And now he's making 8 figures and has to produce at a level of a very good, if not all-star left fielder / DH. So like that's, Robert doesn't have to worry about that as long as he's healthy because he plays that good of a center field. So that's why I think like there's room for him to still be on the White Sox, but I would say like after next year, maybe if, say Montgomery's back, starts bothering him again, or there are some like existential crises for the White Sox that money can't solve, then maybe you do have to say like, well, we have to roll it over to whatever the next core is, whether that's like Noah Schultz and Jacob Gonzalez or what have you. But I think it's not quite that dire yet to trade Robert because you can still trade him for full value over the next few acquisition periods, the deadline, the winter, and then the next deadline even.
Yeah, the White Sox have control of Luis Robert through the 2027 season. I think it's a bit of a crazy idea, but again, we're doing these podcast reviews and we're talking about things that a lot of you will be going through the mental exercises and the mental gymnastics when you're filling out your offseason plan projects on SoxMachine.com. Maybe some of you are entertaining the idea of trading Robert. He does have 4 years left, $67.5 million on the contract with the White Sox. The final 2 years, the final $40 million of that contract are club options. So, Jim, I don't think it's necessarily Chris Getz would push Luis Robert out there and let everyone know in Major League Baseball that Luis Robert Jr. is available via trade. But if I am a team that is on the cusp, let's say I'm the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I see Luis Robert as 4 years, $67.5 million left in the contract, and I have a lot of young talent on my team, and you just took our farm director, like, I would pick up the phone and call. Like, I don't think it's necessarily the White Sox shopping Luis Robert, but I've got to imagine many contending teams or teams that think they will be contending in 2024, they would be the ones picking up the phone and calling, because we talked about in previous episodes with Cody Bellinger and how I think that's like the perfect target for the White Sox, that there's no way in the world that Jerry Reinsdorf's going to fork over the money to be able to sign Cody Bellinger. So it's just a dream at this point. But for the teams that don't sign for Cody Bellinger and they need help in the outfield, they need help in center field, man, I'd be picking up the phone and see if you can get Luis Robert off the Chicago White Sox for 4 years, $67.5 million. If he continues to perform like he did in 2023, that's a steal. That's a steal of a contract.
Yeah, and I think it's not insulting either or a dumb or a waste of a call to do that, because the White Sox could be facing some kind of large-scale teardown, even if like Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't want to admit it might have to happen. Just I think really it comes down to like how soon can Colson Montgomery be ready responsibly? Not rush him up for the sake of propping up Luis Robert, but just like if he is like if really the back strain was not like anything structural with his back, but just like a bad luck muscle issue and the oblique was tied to that, and just a full off season will put that completely in his rearview mirror and starts the year in Birmingham. But then like, he gets to Charlotte and that looks like a waste of time. Like perhaps by the end of next year, like Montgomery looks like somebody who can run with Robert and be like a, real core complementary star to Robert's own skill set. But like, if that doesn't happen, like it does make sense for another team to lay the groundwork, even if they don't expect a deal to get done this winter, talk about it like, well, let's put some players on their radar, on the White Sox radar to follow during the 2024 season. And if the deadline rolls around and we really need an outfielder and the White Sox are going nowhere and it doesn't look like Roberts, or their next wave of talent is imminent, like maybe all of a sudden that conversation becomes way more appealing or easier to stomach for not only Chris Getz and Jerry Reinsdorf, but White Sox fans as well, who are just like, there's really nothing here. So I get it. I can see the appeal of like thinking about what the White Sox farm system looked like, or like the window of contention or what have you. But I still think there's time for slow roll discussions to happen of just, we're thinking about it. We'd like to, he makes sense at 4 years and $67 million. He makes sense at 3 years. And I'm not going off the top of my head, like $57 million. He makes sense at 2, it's not a case of like his contract is going to blow up and like this is the affordable year that Luis Robert needs to make the rest of his contract understandable for any team. Like there's still a window here to where like just start some trade talks just in case it really gets dark for the White Sox. And I don't think it's quite there yet because I still think they're working through some stuff.
Yeah, I do wonder if Luis Robert is on the track of Jose Abreu, where the White Sox just pretty much punt Abreu's prime years. Where the best seasons for Luis Robert Jr. are going to be on the worst White Sox teams. And when the White Sox look like they're going to be pretty decent, then Luis Robert is, falling out of his prime years. Like that's, you want to be the best that you could be to take advantage of Luis Robert's prime years because of everything that he can do on the field.
They thought they were gonna.
It's just, and they thought they were going to, and unless other players step up. So again, Luis Robert, the least of the White Sox worries going into 2024, and all you're hoping is, can you please duplicate what you did in 2023, Luis Robert? Now, moving over to left field, Andrew Benintendi. Jim, was 2023 a failure for Andrew Benintendi? And what does 2024 have to look like for him to be considered, quote unquote, good?
Yeah, it was a failure. I think anytime you're closer to replacement level than like average, the defense was bad. The OBP was there for some of the season, but then it was 299 in the second half. So even that tailed off. The power never materialized. He just, ran the bases well, which is the other thing he was supposed to do, but he, didn't really get on base to use it all that much in the second half. So it was more or less a lost season, which is really troubling when it's the first year of a 5-year, $75 million deal. And like all the hand wringing and angst over the Yasmani Grandal contract, like that followed the game plan for at least the first 2 years. Like Grandal was really good in his first year. He was good around an injury. So when he was on the field, he produced exceptionally, but like he did have an injury that ate into some of his value in his second year. But even then that was good. Third year was just a disaster. Fourth year looked like the fourth year should have looked like all along. When you're signing like a catcher in his mid 30s, you should look at Grandal's contract and say like, we got to figure out what 2023 looks like in case he just can't answer the bell anymore. So like the season he had was the kind of season I expected when he signed the contract. I just didn't expect 2022 to be as bad as it was, just because of not only the injuries he had, but just how the White Sox were so unconcerned with how hurt he was. And there was a similar thing with Benintendi where the hand injury, the broken hamate that ended his year at the Yankees the previous season, and the White Sox come in and sign him, and like the White Sox have a tendency to do this, like Kelvin Herrera with his foot injury, Joe Kelly with his bicep nerve, with the Dodgers, Jeff Keppinger with his shoulder injury in the offseason, like tend to sign these guys knowing they had some kind of injury that ended their previous season and say like, well, we can work past it. And then sure enough, like they don't look good. And like even Jose Rodriguez, who had a hamate injury, a broken hamate at the end of his year with Birmingham, like his power and productions really sat for the first like 1.5 months of the season. So like, I think they're kind of parallel tracks and cautionary tales of just like that. You have to take these injuries seriously and say like, well, they might be able to swing the bat technically and might be worth playing, but their impact is going to be delayed. And so with Benintendi, like he got on base, but just like the contact was not scary. It was kind of wet newspaper-ish.
Right.
And like for a while, he didn't even threaten a homer. It wasn't even like that he didn't hit one. It's not like even like he got a load of, he got all of that one. And you think it's just going to hook foul, like threaten like maybe section 106 or no, that'd be 110, like a little bit sections over around the foul pole from 108. And then like it falls like maybe 20 feet short of the foul pole in the foul. Like even like his good looking contact wasn't going anywhere. So I think you can blame the hand injury for that. You can't, I would push more of the blame onto Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, thinking like, well, they thought they were, cutting a corner here and thinking they were very clever boys for signing somebody who would take a $75 million deal to solve a problem. And like, that's not problem solving money anymore especially for the White Sox. So like, that's why I'm not necessarily personally blaming him too much. I think like when it comes to this year, this is the year where like, you can't blame, I mean, maybe you can't blame Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, but they're not there anymore. Chris Getz, he's inheriting this situation. Hopefully he's not inheriting a problem, but this would be the year that you can't blame the hand injury anymore. So it's now a matter of like, was that power real, or was that power something that only existed 2 years ago, or like a younger man's, was it a younger man's clothes basically? And now Benintendi, as he approaches 30 into his early 30s, is just kind of this punch hitter, gap to gap guy, gets on base, can't be counted upon to play defense anymore necessarily because he didn't look good out there. And now what do you have? It's like, that's an even worse contract than Grandal's by far, because even if Grandal was a flawed defender, he did some things well defensively. Like Benintendi, he doesn't seem to read the ball well, like his routes aren't good, and he doesn't have an arm. So he doesn't have like Grandal's framing that helps you make an argument as to like what he brings defensively.
Yeah, for Andrew Benintendi, again, he had 262 with a 326 on base percentage, slugging 356. So to Jim's point, the wet paper for a bat, really pitiful slugging percentage. And we all know on how important slugging percentage is in today's game of baseball. So it's a 682.
Especially for left field only.
Yeah, right. It's a 682 OPS, an 87 OPS plus for Andrew Benintendi. So back to the question of what would be a good 2024 season, like looking ahead, like is a 105 OPS or weighted runs created plus a 2-WAR season, either on Fangraphs and BaseballReference.com. Is that good enough, Jim, for Andrew Benintendi?
No, I would say something approaching like his 2022, 120 OPS plus, got to like an OPS above 750. It was more OBP than slugging, but either one would help this White Sox team. So even if he's not somebody who's going to slug like over 400 by far, clear it with any kind of comfort that makes it like there's a real left fielder. At least he, hit 304. He got on base. He got hit by some pitches. Actually, that year he didn't get hit by pitches. It's all walks. But like he managed to be somebody who could take, like the homers weren't necessarily there, but he had doubles, he had triples, he stole some bases, like he ran it well. So I think there's like a version of Benintendi that's good, and it all amounts to like a 3-win player, 4-win player. But that requires a defense to come around a little as well. And even if you say like, well, Luis Robert Jr. is so good at ranging to right center that like Benintendi's metrics might be hurt a little bit by not making exceptional plays going to deep left center because Robert covers that ground. Like I can see that, but like even just the other metrics, like, the going in, going back, going to his right, the jump metrics on StatCast, like they were all pretty much like mediocre at best. So that's why, like, I think you have to see some kind of rebound in his outfield play, and hopefully it's not a case or like, hopefully it is a case rather of just like him doing his best around a wrist issue. And then like eventually the White Sox caving in and Grifol being a non-entity and him just saying like, I'm not really seeing it this year. I'm just getting through this year. I'm considering it lost. I'm not 100%. Like I'm just going to kind of punch the clock, come in, try not to screw up too much, like not be noticeable. not be the team's biggest problem. And he wasn't the team's biggest problem. And when I wrote about Benintendi's defense, I got like some comments saying like, well, why are you writing about him when everything else is worse? It's like, well, it's September. I've written about everything that's worse. I finally gotten around to writing about Benintendi. Like he is kind of the least of the problems, or at least a lesser problem. So that's why like he wasn't, an urgent issue aside from like the lack of home runs, which I wrote about. So that's, I think, why you have to see the defense improve, because that does help prop up his like overall contributions to the team. So that's why 2 wins is enough, because I think 2 wins means like he's not doing anything defensively, which you have to do if you're left field only and you're signed to be left field only and you don't have anybody playing right field right now.
For the White Sox, Benintendi and Robert, again, they're under control for the next 4 seasons. So we don't expect Robert to be moved this offseason. And of course, nobody's going to take on Andrew Benintendi and his contract remaining of the last 4 years after he signed a 5-year deal last year. So they're the mainstays in the outfield. But there's a lot of questions about who is going to be in right field and who's going to be behind the plate for the White Sox in 2024. And I think that's where a bulk of the work is going to have to be with everyone's offseason plan projects. We'll talk about right field and the catching position after a quick word from our sponsors. When I saw the Milwaukee Bucks make that big trade with Portland for Damian Lillard, I immediately went on Game Time to see when they were playing the Chicago Bulls. Saw it was on November 30th, and Game Time had great seats in the 300 level right at center court in the United Center. Great tickets at a great price. I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. Use Game Time to purchase your tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee helps eliminate stressing over tickets. If you find tickets in the same section and even row for less money, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and get $20 off your first purchase using our promo code SOXMACHINE. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
Most weight loss programs are short-term fixes, but the problem is managing your weight needs a long-term solution. And that's what makes Noom different. Noom uses science and personalization so you can manage your weight today and in the future. Their psychology-based approach helps you build better habits and behaviors that are easier to maintain. And they help you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have those cravings. Noom's personalized courses are easy to follow and will help grow your confidence with tools you can put into practice on day one. The best part? You decide how Noom fits into your life, not the other way around. And based on a sample of 4,272 Noomers, 98% say Noom helps change their habits and behaviors for good. Start taking control of your weight management and join the millions who have lost weight with Noom. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com to sign up for your trial today.
Coming after the break in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Sox Machine Podcast. All right, so let's talk about right field for the Chicago White Sox. And Jim, a trivia question for you. And this would kind of make it a painful sporcle. How many different players the White Sox had make starts in right field in 2023?
8?
11. 11 different players started a game at right field for the Chicago White Sox. 6 of them made 10 or more starts. Oscar Colas led the White Sox with 69 starts in right field. Gavin Sheets made 68 starts in right field. Clint Frazier, third on the list with 26 starts in right field. Adam Hazley, I keep forgetting he played for the White Sox in 2023. He made 16 starts. Eloy Jimenez made 14 starts. And Trace Thompson, bless his soul, made 13 starts after the White Sox acquired him from the Los Angeles Dodgers. And then Jake Marisnick made starts out there. Zach Remillard, Billy Hamilton, and who could forget the Tyler Naquin start in right field for the White Sox in 2023. So 11 different players made a start at right field for the White Sox, and the result was expected when you have that many faces playing at right field, when Oscar Colas and Gavin Sheets are well below replacement value when it comes to WAR. Right field is still a mess, and it might be even a bigger mess because now, rightfully so, there are some serious questions about the staying power for Oscar Colas moving forward. Jim, what do you think the plan is for the White Sox going into this offseason for right field? Because reviewing right field in 2023, I don't think is worth the pain and the emotional damage to talk through that again, because everyone was awful and it was so bad. Like I mentioned, I'm wondering that if Oscar Colas is plan A again, what does that mean for the near future for the Chicago White Sox?
Yeah, Gavin Sheets and Oscar Colas had about a full season's worth of plate appearances between them, and they were worth negative 2.9 wins above replacement, or 2.9 wins below replacement between them. So, yeah, I think Colas has the possibility to be a major dividing point, fault line on this roster or in the organization, or maybe it's revealed that he was among the fault lines within the organization before Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn got fired. Because going back to November, that's when Colas was presented as plan A for right field versus plan B, or starting the year in Charlotte. But if a couple emergencies, happen, then he's going to have to be called up and thrown into the fire. That was basically November. They went their entire offseason. They mapped it out to where we're not going to solve right field. We think he can do it. And then, when Andy Barkett was fired from being the White Sox minor league hitting coordinator, he told the White Sox Daily podcast that he didn't think Colas is ready. He needed more trial and error and failure in the minor leagues because the plate approach wasn't quite there. So I'm not sure whether that's revisionist history a little bit, or wanting to, maybe separate himself from maybe the most smoldering of failures on the roster. Or maybe it's a case where there was a camp, Barkett and others in the minor leagues. Maybe Chris Getz was in that camp of saying I'm not sure about this. I don't think he's ready yet. And Rick Hahn saying we're doing it, I can see, based on the way Grifol managed him the whole year and was putting him through his paces in spring training and, kind of playing hard ass on him going all the way back to February. Even when guys were in the World Baseball Classic and there's all the playing time, later on, we'd learn that Grifol only managed guys with fewer than 2 years of service time. He wasn't interested in managing veterans. He didn't have the gravitas to do that. But, early on, before all that was established, or before the season went to the toilets and he didn't have the credibility to do that, he was even, hard on Colas. So I'm really curious, whether I could see all sorts of things being the case. Colas goes back to Charlotte, is treated as a prospect again, treated as last year never happened, but also that he was never plan A in the first place. And they're trying to go back to September 2022 to where oh, he's interesting. Let's make him earn it in Charlotte this year. Or I could see it being on the opposite side to where he's already just kind of a non-entity, and nobody wants to deal with him anymore based on the way things happened. And they're just going to try to, see if he can boost his value in Charlotte and see if he can be traded at any point. I think all things are available right now. So I'm really curious what the rhetoric is going to be around Colas, because now that Chris Getz is here, is Chris Getz beholden to him? Does he feel was there indeed this rift between player development and the top of the front office with regards to Colas's readiness or his ability to handle failure at the major league level? I'm fascinated by it. And it's really the only way that Colas is interesting right now, because the way he played, just nothing went right and his at-bats weren't worth watching.
Yeah, it is disappointing because in 2022 in 3 levels, Colas in high A, double A, and triple A combined hit .314 with a .371 on base percentage and slugged .524. He hit really well in Birmingham. That's what gave me some confidence because he had like a 928 OPS in Birmingham. And for a lot of White Sox prospects, that's the brick wall. They have a difficult time hitting in Double-A, and Colas did.
He stayed on lefties too. Like
Right.
it wasn't just mashing righties. Like he could actually stay on lefties and hit them for average too. So that's why I was fairly bullish on him, even if not as a plan A. Just thought as maybe a contributor at some point in the second half of 2023.
There's a lot of things that I'm concerned about. You have new hitting coaches coming in, and this point when we're recording the podcast, we don't know who the new White Sox hitting coaches are that Pedro Grifal's bringing in. We know that Colas was in Pedro Grifal's doghouse pretty much the entire season. Like, I don't know, to your point, Jim, I don't know if Grifal thinks highly of Oscar Colas off the field, but on the field, that was like the one player that Grifal had no problem, I should say, calling him out to the media that he needs to work on some things while everybody else was greatly struggling. And Grifal would often say, I'm not even thinking about that. He was thinking about Colas a lot last year, and Colas hitting 216, 257 on base percentage and slugging 314. That's a whopping 571 OPS. He hit just 5 home runs for the White Sox in 75 games. Very disappointing season for Oscar Colas. He turns 25 this upcoming season. Remember, I just said Luis Robert is 25 in 2023. Luis Robert will be 26 in 2024. So Colas is like a year younger than Luis Robert on the age curve. And there's a lot of questions, though, because Colas not only missed 2020, but he also missed 2021 seasons. There was a huge break between him playing in Japan and him playing in the States. He is now a little bit on the older side. So to your point, like, do Chris Getz and Josh Barfield decide collectively we need to hit the reset button on Oscar Colas, and we need to plan on him not being plan A, and he needs to be in Charlotte, and he should expect to be in Charlotte for almost the entire season unless we have a huge need because of injury. And even if that player heals up, Colas is probably not going to stay up with the team. He'll be sent back to Charlotte. Like, if he needs more experience or more seasoning on the field, then I can understand where that's coming from Getz and Barfield. But again, Colas is 25 years old, and he's going to be entering his prime years, supposedly, in baseball terms. So it's one of those things that I'm just wondering, like, you either got it or you don't. And maybe Oscar Colas is just a quadruple A type of player, Jim, where, yeah, he rakes against minor league pitching, but when he gets to the major leagues, XYZ reason, he just forgets how to hit.
Also, the defense was bad. Like, that's what surprised me as well, is like, he looked really unprepared for the speed of the major league game in right field. Like, a lot of rushed actions early on, like a lot of bobbled balls, not collecting them, trying to make throws. Then that seemed to manifest into overcaution, to where like he'd really round off a ball in the gap to make sure like that it was like, that was his way of slowing the game down, was to like literally have the ball approaching him slower. So like rounding it to where the ball would be losing some steam, he could gather himself, but then like he would give up extra bases that way, or he would not get to a ball because the route was so generous. So that's the other thing that was baffling, was not only like the way the plate approach just deteriorated on him, but also just the lack of like pace, I would say, in right field. Just the ability to adjust to the major league game was really, and that's why, like, when I look at Colas, and then you see that Chris Getz, the director of player development, is now the GM, versus Chris Getz being in the line of fire, or needing to find a new job because like players did not develop with the White Sox. Like, you'd look at Colas and say, like, what happened here? Like, why did even like his athleticism, which people thought was pretty good, why did that not manifest itself at the major league level, to where like he was a terrible outfielder as well as a terrible hitter?
He's got a good arm.
Yeah.
When he hits the cutoff or it reaches its destination, but I mean, he could chuck it. There's no question about that. The throwing arm is strong. The throwing accuracy could use some work, and throwing to the right base and knowing which base he's supposed to throw to could also use some work. But if there's anything that Oscar Colas does well, he throws the ball very hard. But there's a lot of work to be done, or I don't know. Again, he hit so well in 2022 down in the minor leagues, and he still hit pretty well in Charlotte in 2023 when he was at AAA, 54 games, 272 batting average, 345 on base percentage, slugged 465 with 9 home runs and 14 doubles. But then again, it's Charlotte and it's AAA, and it's really hard to buy into those type of numbers, especially from the International League, but they're not terrible numbers. It just, again, it is baffling on why Oscar Colas, who I had confidence because he hit in AA and AAA in 2022 would fare better than he did this year, and he did not. So it's a lot of questions for the White Sox coming to 2024 in this offseason. What do they have with Oscar Colas and how Colas fits into any plans? But with that being said, Jim, is the starting right fielder part of the 40-man roster or in the farm system for the Chicago White Sox, Jim? Or is this something that Chris Getz and his front office staff, they're going to have to find someone to play right field in the offseason?
Seems like it has to be on the shopping list of like Trace Thompson is getting all those starts at the end of the year, and Trace Thompson did nothing to deserve those starts. Like he had a 37 OPS plus, batted 171, struck out 40 times in 92 plate appearances. And yet he was getting the starts because like, not sure. Like that was like among the cases of like, because the White Sox had so many problems and Trace Thompson was an inessential employee to where like nobody really thought much about him. So he was just making every start. He played a good defensive right field, made some, fine plays and didn't draw attention to himself in the field to where like that was good enough. But like Gavin Sheets is like the one guy I think it'll be interesting to see like what the White Sox think of him, because the one thing that keeps him afloat is that when runners are in scoring position or like bases are loaded and you need like a good at bat, he provides good at bats. Like he's good with the bases loaded. Like when, you just don't want to see somebody like get over aggressive and flail away and chase pitches out of the zone. Like Gavin Sheets doesn't do that. And I had this hunch during the year, like, oh, Gavin Sheets is up good. And then I looked it up just to see if that was actually anything to it or whether he was mediocre, but everybody else is worse. And like, no, he was very good with runners in scoring position. 808 OPS in such situations, more walks than strikeouts with runners in scoring position. With the bases loaded, he was 6 for 8. Like he really zeroed in close and late, 2 outs with the runners in scoring position, 889 OPS. Close and late was, mediocre, but high leverage, 887 OPS. So like he provided some high impacted bats like in key situations, which is why I think, among other reasons, like the lack of competition, but why the White Sox are either willing to overlook what he doesn't do everywhere else, or just because like he's the best of what's left. But I think just that knack of like being able to drive in a run here and there and not look overmatched when like you just need a fly ball. Like he's very good at delivering the fly ball, like 4 sack for a flies and like part-time duty this year. Like that's probably maybe a team leading rates based on how the White Sox struggle to get the ball in the air. I think, he led the team despite being a part-time player and sacrifice flies. So like he does those things well to where when everything else is on fire, like I can understand why Pedro Grifol would feel like, I guess Sheets, because he at least, he doesn't make me, I look forward to him coming to the plate when we need a run to score in a risk situation or like a runner on third situation, which I think not enough White Sox can say about themselves.
I was contemplating cutting Gavin Sheets in my offseason plan project, but
yeah, I mean, like he should be like in a normal roster, like he just doesn't fit anywhere. But like, that's the one thing where like, that's what I think people overlook, or people, overlook just, it's, I can understand, or I can empathize with Grifol to an extent, even Tony La Russa previously, and like running him out there because like the at-bats, when you like can least afford a terrible at-bat, Sheets is the best at avoiding them. I think, among any White Sox player, especially like lefty versus righty. Like, he's a lefty facing tough righties. Like, you don't mind having him up there. And I think that's really a team that was better about finding left-handed bats and finding guys who could hit righties. Like, you wouldn't care about that so much. But as long as the roster is this thin, I can see that sustaining him for at least another spring training, season opening spot on a 26-man roster. And then, like, hopefully at some point expectations actually kick in.
Yeah, I don't think the starting right fielder is currently on the 40-man roster for the Chicago White Sox. So I look forward to everyone's offseason plans and your creativity on addressing right field for the Chicago White Sox and what type of player that you acquire to play that position. Because I don't think it's Oscar Colas. I don't think it's going to be Gavin Sheets. I don't think it's going to be the other 9 guys that I mentioned. No, I don't think Eloy Jimenez is going to be the starting right fielder for the Chicago White Sox. Yeah, I don't think that guy's on the team right now. So good luck. Find that right fielder. And while you're looking for a right fielder, I think you might want to look for a catcher as well, because with Yasmani Grandal and Sevi Zavala also gone, he was waived during the season and he latched on with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And we saw Korey Lee and Carlos Perez at the end of the season, Jim. Is it wise to roll into this offseason with the mindset that, yeah, these two, Korey Lee and Carlos Perez, are our main catchers?
No. I would say, like, Perez, like, I don't know why the White Sox, I don't know if it's probably too strong to say they dislike him, but they're not enamored with him. If, like, they're not giving him the playing time when Grandal looks done, they're not giving the playing time necessarily when, like, Zavala isn't hitting. Even when Korey Lee came up, Lee seemed to be their first priority and Perez was an afterthought. Like, you look at his at-bats and, like, they're fine for a catcher. Like, the contact ability still, it made the jump from AAA to the majors. The contact quality is lacking for the most part, but he did hit a home run, hit some doubles. So, like, he was able to capitalize on some mistakes. And, like, by the end of the year, he started looking like, oh, he's somebody who can help maybe. Or, like, for a catcher hitting 8th or 9th, he can certainly do worse. Defense is like, the framing needs work. The blocking's okay. The arm is not strong, but the pop time seems okay to where, like, he can occasionally throw a guy out. So I didn't see any necessarily fatal flaws that made me think, like, why isn't Perez getting some priority, or why isn't he getting, like, 3 weeks of starts being the number 1 catcher? Instead, like, Korey Lee seemed to jump him. And, like, I watched Lee play in Charlotte, and the timing didn't look there. Like, the strikes, striking out a lot. The contact was poor, like pop-ups, grounders, not, putting a sweet spot on the ball. And, like, there were some people clamoring for Korey Lee, saying, like, you just cut Grandal, get Lee up here. And I was saying, like, no, I don't think Lee's ready yet. Had the strained oblique. Yeah. Give him some time. And then the White Sox called him up, like, all right, so what do I know? And then you watch him hit, like, okay, I feel better about myself as a scout, given how well he hit or didn't hit with the White Sox. And, like, you can see why Lee is appealing, because, like, he blocks pretty well. The arm's pretty good. He runs really well for catcher. So, like, there's an athlete behind the plate, but in terms of hitting, like, the bat just doesn't get where it needs to go, and framing isn't good or anything to write home about. So, like, I don't see somebody you want catching regularly right now based on the skill set. Like, he either needs to frame a lot better, or he needs to hit measurably better to be, like, even a second catcher right now. So if they don't care for Perez for one reason or another, and, like, Lee showed what he shows, then yeah, I mean, they have Edgar Caro, they have Adam Hackenberg, who made some nice strides last year. Like, they have some guys who might be able to help catch some major league games at the end of 2024, 2025. But for, like, the first half, which I think you have to count on at least the first half, yeah, like, this pairing, like, Perez's second catcher, I think is not bad. Like, I think I like him more than the White Sox do. But Lee, like, based on what he showed, unless there's some kind of turnaround, or whether, like, the oblique was really hampering him more than what he showed, and given that the Astros traded him for Kendall Graveman, who really hasn't helped them a whole lot, I don't think, I'm thinking, like, they might not have thought Lee was all that great either. So that's why I'm not inclined to give him a whole lot of weight when trying to pencil out the White Sox future.
Yeah, it really does feel like Salvador Perez is going to be the target, isn't it? Because...
Yep. I mean, it's kind of pointing there to be like, yeah, the major league catcher now, and then Edgar Quero needs like a shepherd. And
yep. Yeah, I don't think the starting catcher's on the roster either for the Chicago White Sox. Because to your point, like with Carlos Perez, maybe they don't think highly of him. I'm not sure. Or they're doubtful about his defensive ability behind home plate. He just played 27 games for the White Sox. In the 24 games that Korey Lee played for the White Sox, he was worth negative .7 WAR. And his weighted runs created plus was negative 27. Negative 27. Yes, it can go below zero for weighted runs created plus. It means he was 127% below league average offensively, where his on-base percentage was just 143 and his slugging percentage was worse, despite having a 7.1% walk rate. And yes, he does block well. Framing is okay. He does have a good pop time, but his caught stealing above average wasn't all that great, so he needs to work on his accuracy. But the pop time for Korey Lee is excellent, 1.91 seconds last year, and his blocks above average is 2 runs above average, so that's good. So I think defensively you have the makings of a major league catcher, but he's so bad swinging the bat that I don't think he could be a starter, which then brings into conversation of, so what do they give up to Kansas City for Salvador Perez to be the starting catcher in 2024? Even though I think the White Sox should go in the route of aiming for guys like Mitch Garver of Texas, who didn't catch a lot because they had Jonah Heim. Gary Sanchez seems to find a second wind here, and Victor Caratini of the Milwaukee Brewers. I think these three would be better options and cheaper options than Salvador Perez, Jim.
yeah, I'm not going to even indulge the question of what the White Sox should give up for Perez, because that feels too close to endorsing the idea at all. So even if it does feel like, to wrap this up, that like, yeah, Sal Perez is the catcher, Whit Merrifield's the right fielder, Royals to patch all the problems. Like, yeah, I don't want to be associated with whatsoever. And I don't want to be like, oh, so you nailed the price on Sal Perez. Like, I don't even want to even try hazard a guess, because it just feels like I want to rage against the dying of that light.
We'll see what the White Sox actually do. But when it comes to this review episode, watching the 2023 season, it's pretty clear the White Sox, they probably don't have their starting right fielder or starting catcher currently on the roster. So when you're working on your offseason plan projects for SoxMachine.com, you'll need to address those two positions. Center field and left field, as we talked about in the first half of this episode, with both Andrew Benintendi and Luis Robert under contract for at least 4 more team years with the Chicago White Sox, that it's probably likely that neither are going to be moved by the Chicago White Sox, even though we did play out that hypothetical of what happens if a team does call and they want to try to get Luis Robert. Don't think it's likely. So there you go. You got left field and center field taken care of. Just got to figure out right field, catching, second base, what you're going to do at shortstop. Again, you could go through those episodes in our previous episodes where we reviewed the infield and starting pitching as well. There's a lot of work to be done during the offseason plan for the Chicago White Sox and on SoxMachine.com. And those plans and that activity will be starting soon after this podcast is released. So we're very excited to get that kicked off. We'll have a Sox Machine live episode to officially kick off the Sox Machine offseason plan project on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. So look forward to our promotions for that kickoff. But Jim, I think we could officially forget about 2023 now. We reviewed everything. Oh, except for the bullpen. Our bullpen review, who cares? It didn't work. Stop spending money on relievers. End of story. There you go. That was also your bullpen review for 2023. But now we can look forward and try to wash away all the nastiness of the 2023 season and look ahead to what could happen and how the new front office shapes this 2024 roster.
Yep, sounds about right. I mean, like, yeah, with the bullpen, given the volatility of relievers and given that none of the White Sox relievers who they brought up at the end of the year look anything close to elite to where you can bank on them for 3 years, like I think it's going to be revolving doors, probably at least like 4 or 5 of those spots, if not more. But yeah, for the timeline, we'll have the Sox Machine live on Thursday, and then we'll launch the offseason plan project on Friday. Probably like around 10 a.m. I'll work on the template. I'll work on the budget and make sure that the post-submission screen is all good to go. But yeah, that's the timeline. So start penciling stuff down and get ready for Friday morning.
Yeah, and that Friday morning, by the way, is October 27th for those that listen to this podcast at a later time. And especially if you catch up or you're catching up a podcast, you listen to this 2 weeks after it's released and you haven't filled out your offseason plan project, you'd still have time to do so on SoxMachine.com. So we look forward to that. We hope that these review episodes helped you guys out as far as some of the conversations that you'll have to be and questions that you have to answer during your offseason plan project, no matter which direction you want to take the White Sox, whether that's trying to contend and win the American League Central in 2024 or a start of another rebuild with a different front office this time. Can't wait to see them. And again, we'll have that kickoff show on Sox Machine live on Thursday, October 26th on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you could subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload our podcast episodes into our YouTube channel, which I just mentioned at youtube.com/Sox Machine. You can follow us on social media. We're everywhere at Sox Machine, and I'm there at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content. They also receive ad-free versions of both the podcast website. We're going to be having our annual town hall as well with our Patreon supporters, where we kind of open up the curtain to show you guys on how things are ran at SoxMachine.com, and Jim and I share what we're planning for the upcoming calendar year in 2024. So again, if you do enjoy our work and you want to help support us and you want more from us, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where monthly plans start at $2 a month, or you can save with an annual subscription. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.